Welcome to Gradcast, the official podcast of the Society of Graduate Students at the University of Western Ontario. Coming to you from the other London, let's start the show. Hello everybody, and welcome to Gradcast, the original podcast of the Society of Graduate Students at the University of Western Ontario. I'm Tristan Johnson, I'm here today with Elkin Sierra, and your topic is really unique, so I'm going to get you to lay it out yourself.
Okay, hi everybody. Here today I'm going to talk about what I'm working on my thesis, which is the acquisition of Spanish lexical stress by Japanese speakers who are learning Spanish as a second language. What I want to know is if they can perceive the Spanish lexical stress. I have two groups. Mm-hmm. One there is in Japan, and the other one there is in Bogota, Colombia. So I want to know if they can perceive this lexical stress, depending on if they are in a class setting,
mm-hmm.
classroom, yeah, and the immersion there is in Colombia.
All right, excellent. There's a lot to unpack there. So first, let's go with the first obvious question. So the numbers, like I'm just imagining. So what would drive you to a subject such as Japanese people learning Spanish?
Okay, I'm a Japanese speaker. Mm-hmm. I've been learning this language for 4 years. It's a very difficult language and very different from Spanish. And as I was studying, because I started to study in Colombia, mm-hmm. I was paying attention to my teachers and the way they pronounce Spanish. And I was wondering myself, what problems could these Japanese speakers could have when they learn Spanish? Mm-hmm. Then I decided to look for information about these two languages. And I found that there are few works on these two languages, but there are a huge quantity on English and Japanese. Mm-hmm. There are many, but Japanese, Spanish, just one work about my. It's quite the same. My research about the acquisition of stress, but just one. Can you imagine? And Japanese and Spanish, they have been in contact from a lot of time. Then I was wondering, this could be a good way to give a new work for the field.
Yeah, it's definitely a wide open area. So it's an interesting thing about that is like, I imagine in the world of studying how people learn languages, that just because of the way economics works, there's probably I've learned a few languages and I always see it from the English perspective because English is my first language. So is this endemic of this particular group of languages, or is it just non-English to non-English overall an underrepresented field of linguistic study?
It's because English is all over the world, mm-hmm. and is the most studied language. Because when I was living in Europe, in England, mm-hmm. I went to Germany, I went to Italy, and I didn't know those languages, German and Italian, but I could communicate in English. Mm-hmm. So it's studied all over the world. So that's why people go and, what's going to happen with the Italians when they learn this area of English? Well, then in Japan, the first language is the first second language
mm-hmm. Yep.
is English. After that, Chinese. And the third one is Spanish right now. It's a very popular language now, but there are a lot of work on that.
All right, yeah, I imagine that the idea of because Japanese to English, I mean, you're talking about like a German-based language mm-hmm. to a what would be the language group that Japanese is in? Do you know?
They have their own roots, Japanese.
Yeah, it's a very weird language. Yeah. Like it's kind of
the writing, we can say that is from the Chinese. They took it from Chinese because they didn't have any writing. Mm-hmm. But when the Chinese arrived in in Japan, they discovered that Chinese could write. So they decided to write Japanese, what they have, the language they have that was called Yamato, with Chinese characters. So the first literature in Japan is written in Chinese.
You see that with a lot of languages that didn't have like written things. Like I'm thinking of like Urdu, where it's sort of like Hindi but with like the Arabic alphabet, or like Turkish, where it has the Latin alphabet but it's like a Central Asian language. So like that is it that kind of situation? Like did Japanese it didn't have a written language beforehand, and they
adopted the Chinese characters, but now they have their own characters that if Chinese can decipher what's on signs and written, but they can read it in the Japanese, but they can know what's the meaning of everything.
So this is like, for like example, like to kind of give an example at home. So this is how like an English person could read French and know what the sounds of the letters are, but they wouldn't be able to actually tell what's actually being said.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like Italian or Portuguese. I can read it and I can understand, but I'm not able to talk it because they are so similar to Spanish. In this case, Chinese, because Chinese people have these characters, and Japanese just adopted them, so they can say what's going on in the newspaper or the signs, but they can't pronounce, because Japanese people, they have their own pronunciation of Yamato language, and they added the Japanese pronunciation and the Chinese pronunciation. That's like when I now I'm learning Japanese, so I have to learn for one character the Chinese pronunciation and the Japanese pronunciation, which is difficult, because if I learn Chinese, I just learn the Chinese pronunciation, but with Japanese, I have to learn 4 or 5 ways of pronouncing that same character.
Yeah, I remember there's like this gradient scale. Like this is based on English, but I imagine it's similar enough for Spanish, because Spanish and English they're not super distant. But they have this list where they classify languages based on how difficult they are, and I believe Japanese and Arabic are like the 2 most difficult languages for somebody to learn.
Yeah, they are very difficult. In Japanese, you have like 3 systems of writing, and they mix together, because they have the Japanese, they have the characters, they're Chinese, and they have 2 syllabaries that are called kana. Then one is called hiragana, and this one is for the grammar, the adjectives, the verbs, and the other one is katakana, and this is for like computer, because that's not Japanese, so that's a foreign theme, so they write that in katakana. So when they write a newspaper, an article, or everyday life, they put them together. So it's quite complicated. But when you learn Chinese, it's just the characters. But the advantage is, if you know English, there are a lot of words written in katakana. Then it's easier for you.
So is katakana kind of like pinyin?
No, because the pinyin, they use the Roman alphabet. In this, it's like a derivation from the characters, the Chinese characters. They make it like very simple, and they were used like to teach, because you have the characters, but you don't know what's the sound of the character. So you use the kana to read that. Then it's like a phonological syllabaries just to pronounce. It doesn't have a meaning. It's just for pronunciation. In Chinese, they use the pinyin for pronouncing the characters using Roman alphabets. But the Japanese, they use the same characters, but it's a simple character.
But are they both used for the same purpose of like having something that you could fit on a keyboard, for example?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Then when you have when you write on the keyboard or the computer, you don't write the character. You just write the pronunciation. Then, for example, if you're going to write taxi, which is it's a loan from English language, so you write takuchi, and the katakana is going to appear, and you just press that word that you're set to write. And if you're going to write, for example, a character like tree, or ki, then you just write ki, K-I, and the character appears.
Oh, okay, that's really clever.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question, I guess, to unpack what you're studying is lexical stress. Can you let us know what that is?
Okay. This is stress is like the prominence of words.
Mm-hmm.
That when we pronounce, we make an emphasis on certain syllables. Then, for example, we have the word father. Then it has two syllables, and the prominence or the emphasis is on the first one, father. So that's the stress. We have the stressor. Then there are certain words that, depending on the position of the stress, the meaning is different. Then we have import. Then the same written word but with different stress position, then it has a different meaning.
It turns from a noun to a verb.
Yeah, just for the stress position. And it happens the same in Spanish. And there are many words like that. And for example, we have the word termino, termino, terminó. Then termino is turn, the stress in the first syllable. Termino is I finished. He terminó, he or she finished. So different meaning according to the position of the stress. Then when Japanese speakers are learning Spanish, that could be a difficulty because Spanish has a different realization of stress than Japanese. And Spanish is a stress accent language, but Japanese is a pitch accent language. That means pitch is a tone, the frequency. They have just the tone, but in Spanish we have the tone as well. We have the length of the syllable and the intensity. 3.
Wow. Okay.
Then in Japanese, they just the cue for perceiving the stress is the tone, no more. But in Spanish, we have 3. Then that could make it difficult for them. And when we have these words that change the meaning according to the position of the stress, like in a question, and the word is in final position, the stress is going to be like there's going to be a displacement of the tone. Like, and for example, we have in a question, él terminó. That's did he finish? Then when we say él terminó, then if we go in a spectrogram, like the picture of the sound, there is going to be a different realization, and the syllable that is believed to be stressed is not the one with the tone. It has moved to the last syllable. Then in Japanese, the cue is a tone. So if you say él terminó, then they're going to understand something different if they are talking about término and not terminó. Then it's going to be confusing for them. Then I think my hypothesis is they're going to have difficulties. The Japanese speakers in Bogota and the Japanese speakers in Japan, because of this different realization of the stress. So in questions, they're going to have difficulties. Then I haven't tested everything. I'm just I'm collecting the data, but I haven't come up with a result. I'm just still collecting the data and testing the participants.
So do you have a little bit of data? Do you have anything that you could talk about how it's turned out, or something through personal experience?
It's I was trying to go to Japan, but I applied for a scholarship to the Japan Foundation, but I couldn't get the scholarship. So I had to decide to do everything from here because it's quite expensive to go to Japan and stay there.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. Then I have 5 professors in Japan helping me with the students. So they have, and I have another person in Bogota who's going to take the computer, the laptop to the place where these people are living. Then I think 20 years ago, I wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, that's true.
Because now with the technology, it's simpler to do it now because I'm using a software that's called Open Sesame, and that's for like running the experiment. And there is another software that is called TeamViewer, and that allows me to show my screen laptop or my desktop with the computer in Japan.
That's impressive.
Yeah, what I have here in my computer, the experiment running on Open Sesame, which is the software for making linguistics experiments, they're gonna have it there as if I were there. That's a very key element of my research now because of technology. Without that, I wouldn't be able to continue.
And how about working in Bogota as well? Like, how's the coordination with them?
I called them in advance, and I have a system that is called Snowball. Then I have a friend there, and she is the head of the academy where I was studying Japanese. So she's saying that there is a person needing participants, and she is looking for the people. And a friend tells a friend, and that friend tells another friend, then is a chain. Now I have 25 participants, and my brother-in-law is going to have everything on the computer and is going to visit this person now after making or setting an appointment. He's going there. He's going to turn on the computer, and it's going to be through Skype. Then I'm going to be able to talk to the person and explaining to him or to her what's going to happen. And my brother-in-law is going to have Open Sesame, and is going to have Skype and TeamViewer on his laptop. So it's going to be easier for them to be in contact with me.
And so you're going to be, it's amazing that you could do research that's based on Colombia and Japan,
yeah,
while in Canada trying to put the data together. And so is there like political motivations or any sort of economic motivations? Like, is there a large Colombian population in Japan or a large Japanese population in Colombia that increases this demand for this Japanese-Spanish like program to work out better?
Yeah, in Colombia, I have as well. I want to study this community. We have a community in the Pacific. Mm-hmm. There are like 3,000 Japanese people there living, and they have their own land, and they are living like in Japan 100 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, because there is a novel that is called Maria, and Maria, in this novel, they describe the Cali. Cali is a city in the Pacific area of Colombia, but this writer describes these farms and this landscape of Cali in the 19th century, that in a beautiful way. So in Japan, a professor read the novel and said, "Oh, I want to know this paradise." Mm-hmm. So he traveled to Colombia, and he knew what he read. He said, "It's true." So he stayed and started to buy land. So after Second World War and all these conflicts in the world, and with Japan, all that, so many people started to go to Colombia, to Cali, because they have some people now living there. And today we have 3,000 people living there. And they have, many of them, they don't speak Spanish because they are living just in their own bubble. Mm-hmm. Many of them speak, like the old generation, they don't speak so much Spanish, but the new generation, they speak Spanish, and they're sent to Japan to study, and then after that they go back to Colombia. And I would like to do some work with these communities as well, because in in Bogota, they speak a very good Spanish. There are lots of foreign people going to study Spanish there in Colombia. So there are Japanese people there learning Spanish.
And what made you suspect that there's going to be an issue with Japanese speakers learning Spanish with this lexical stress?
Oh, because I was reading, and the professor that is helping me, it was his article I was reading, is Professor Kimura. I was reading, and he said that maybe questions could be a difficulty for them. But he didn't explain more. He said that could be a good way to know more about the acquisition of Spanish lexical stress by Japanese speakers. So I said, oh, this could be a good topic. Then I started to read about the questions, and I didn't find anything related on this topic with Japanese and Spanish. So I decided to start my research questions and talk to my supervisor, and she said, this is a good topic and this hasn't been studied, so you have a good theme now. So I wrote to Professor Kimura telling him, I'm working on this. Is just your article the only one written, or there are more, because I haven't been able to find anything? And he wrote back to me and he said, no, I'm the only one with this article, so we're going to be pioneers in this field. So that's why this work is important, because it has a pedagogical implication. So
it'll help teach Spanish to Japanese people.
Teachers know, in this stage they're gonna have these troubles, or they're not gonna get it, or in immersion, because there are some works on immersion students, and they don't perform well, and the class instructed students, they perform better than the ones in immersion. But it depends on the situation and the context they were. That's why we have to study these immersion situations, because maybe they are in immersion, but they go to study, and after that they go back to their Japanese friends bubble, and they don't speak any Spanish. But that's why I'm looking for people who are the participants, people who are learning in the university or working in Colombia. And the ones in Japan, they have to be just classroom setting students.
And how has it been different for, you were talking a little bit about how this is a problem that comes up when you do immersion, but how is it when comparing the people studying Spanish in Japan as opposed to Colombia?
Yeah.
Or if you don't have the data yet, I mean.
No, but I could say that the people in Colombia, they're going to have an advantage, because they're going to have a native speaker. In Japan, they could have a Japanese speaker that could have an accent, or could have a good, I still don't know what kind of instructor they have there, because they don't give me that information.
It's really hard to immigrate to Japan, so I imagine they don't have that many.
All the professors that are helping me, they are Japanese that speak Spanish. They speak they have a very advanced level in Spanish, but maybe because the people who are going to be in Bogota at the time of the experiment, they are more time sharing with people speaking in Spanish all the time and hearing Spanish all the time, and the Japanese, the teacher is going to be a native Spanish speaker. That could be an advantage. But you know that when you are learning a language, you have to study, and sometimes you know many things that a native speaker don't know about the same language, right? Because you're learning, you're not acquiring that. And maybe, like in these studies I was reading, the instruction could give them more tools than the ones just being in immersion language. But it depends on the context. I don't know. I have to like
parse the data.
Collect all the data and say, okay, they didn't speak Spanish all the time because they were just going to class or going to the workplace for a short time, and after that they went back to their house and they didn't speak any Spanish, just Japanese. That was a case with Korean speakers who were in immersion in the States. They went to study, but after that they went back to like the Korean bubble, and they didn't. The students that were in the classroom in Korea learning English outperformed the ones who were in immersion. So I have to be careful with the context of learning of the students and what they are doing after and before class.
No, that's really good. And so, because you mentioned like a bunch of your friends and your like brother-in-law and such are in Colombia, so you're here from Colombia. You came from Colombia to come here.
Yeah.
And I'm just interested because you're studying this thing that's about Colombia and Japan, and you have to have a good story as to like how you ended up all the way up in Canada doing just a study. It's just interesting. I'd love to hear the story.
I was studying Japanese, so I got interested in study people who were Japanese speaker and learning Spanish, and I decided to apply for scholarship in Japan, but I didn't get it, and that was like the year of the tsunami. And I said, oh, maybe because of that I couldn't go there. Then I decided to apply to Canada because I remember McGill University. Somebody told me about McGill University, but I didn't apply for McGill University because they didn't have like the modern languages department like the one here in Western. Because it depends where the university you apply. They're gonna give you some things, and they're not gonna give you other things. Then at Western, if you are accepted, they give you everything, the whole package. You're gonna be a TA, you're gonna have something to survive, money, and the scholarship. But other universities, okay, you're accepted, but now you have to look for the money to survive. Then it's quite difficult. And I was looking which university could be better, and I applied for Ottawa and Western. And Ottawa, I had some troubles with the documents I was sending there, and through all the process, they were telling me, you have to send more documents. You have to send more documents. Because I was they weren't comfortable with all the documentation I was sending, and in that time I received the Western answer, and they were telling me you're accepted to come here and to as a PhD student. So I decided to come. That's why I arrived here in Canada. And
so good so far.
Huh?
So good so far.
Yes, it's a good experience. I was before in England because I won a scholarship to go there, but it's something completely different. Here is different, and I spend more time here. I spent there like a year, and I've been here for 3 years, 3 winters.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and Japanese. I was at university, and it wasn't through linguistics that I got interested into Japanese. It was through literature, because I read a novel written by Yasunari Kawabata, who was the first Nobel Prize in literature in Japan. And I said, wow, I want to read this in the original language. But I haven't been able to read that because it's very difficult to read literature in Japanese, even for Japanese people. It's very difficult. So, and after that, I started to study Japanese. And meanwhile I was studying Japanese, I got interested in studying the acquisition of Spanish by Japanese speakers.
I wish you all the best luck. You're building bridges between cultures, which is a good way to do it. Well, thank you so much, Elkin, for coming on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all we got for this week. If you like this episode, share it with someone. Check us all out on Twitter and Facebook. Both you can find through Gradcast Radio. You can go to our website to see more episodes at gradcastradio.ca. And if you want to come on the show and talk about your own research, great line for your CV, go to gradcastradio@gmail.com. The theme is Happy Boy by Kevin MacLeod, and we will see you guys next time.